The first thing we do is open a blank project in Godot. Then we will have to import our resources. For this project, we will at least need two different button textures. Basically one for the normal state and one for the pressed or selected button or whatever you want. Additionally, we've got sound effects for pressing the button and a dummy game background. Just in this place you'd have your game you want the menu for, and then we also have a font for the button. For all of these you can choose whatever you want. We can import the resources by just dragging and dropping them into the window. Let's next create a new folder and we'll call it assets, just to keep everything organized. So we'll move all these files into the newly created folder. Next we will start setting up the project by rescaling the window. You can skip this part if you already have your game. If not, add a new node. We'll start with a blank node. And let's call that the root node. Then we'll add a child node, which is just a texture rect. This is just a placeholder for your own game. We will scale it to the whole screen size and then add our game background. Finally, we'll save the scene by hitting Ctrl+S. Next, we'll create a custom theme to change the default style and font of our buttons. Right-click in the lower window, add a new resource, search for theme, and we'll call it GUI. Next, search for the button here and we will first override the default texture of the button. Select the new texture, click on it and drag and drop your PNG into that field. One thing that I didn't mention and went over a bit too quickly maybe was that you have to hit the plus down here first in order to add a texture. Alright, next we open up this menu on the right and set margins for the texture. You can see from the picture above, it should roughly be such that the border of your button is isolated and you have a clear region in the middle where the text will be. The reason for that is as follows. Basically, this is just supposed to be a theme and not saying anything about the button size yet. So imagine we want to scale up the button later on. Then if we just scale up the texture, we'd have these weird effects in the corner. So instead we divide the texture and then require that only this middle part scales. By that we can have a nice button no matter what the shape is. So in comparison, you can see on the left we've got the broken texture, and on the right the nice one. Now we're going to repeat the same thing for the other texture. So we add a new Starbucks texture for the hover effect this time, and we drag and drop the new texture into the slot up there. Again, we adjust the texture margins as before. Alright, now we've got a button with a hover effect. We want the same hover texture if the button is in a pressed state, so we just copy it over like that and done. Next we click on this T to add our font. Go on the plus and then just once again drag and drop our font file into the slot. There. So let us now adjust the font size. Let's go with 32. We first have to click the plus again. Okay, maybe we can go a bit larger even. Oops. No, I think 32 is fine. Next we're going to create the actual physical menu. So let us start by adding a control node. This will be the container for the pause screen. And let's rename this as well into in-game. Okay, next we'll add color. See, color rect, which is just going to dim the screen a bit when we open the pause screen. Okay, the next thing is a container. So these will be the actual buttons on the pause screen. Let's make this color rect. Oh, actually, click that and then make the color rect full screen. And we'll set the alpha to something low and choose black. All right. Next, let's add some buttons. As you can see, the button is very tiny up in the corner, but let's not worry about that yet. We'll address that in a minute. Okay, next we'll add something called a control node again, and then a button, another button. So this control node basically acts as a spacer between the buttons, and we'll determine the size later. So let's add another one. We'll want 4 buttons in total. Another button, then another control, and a final button. All right, so we've got all the essential ingredients. So next, we want to make them look nice. First, we'll basically tell the buttons to expand to fill all the space that they have, so that later on we only have to change the size of this parent item, the pause menu, in order to set the button size. As you can see, while we're doing this, the buttons are changing the size and are kind of all of the same size, and equally fill up the whole pause menu container. Now we can just simply apply the theme to this pause menu container, and as you can see, we've got our buttons in a way. They still look a bit over proportional, but that's because we haven't scaled them up yet. So let's just add some text for now. All right, so next let's move the whole thing. We'll scale it up a bit and then click this button up there, importantly, so that we move everything together and put it into the middle. All right, here in the transform settings, we can even set the size to a very particular value if you want to. So let's go with this certain size. Next, we'll adjust the size of the controls. So we want some more space between the buttons. So we'll go to layout and then set a minimal size in the Y direction for these controls. As you can see, the buttons kind of space out and take the space that they have available in this fixed pause menu container. All right, so far it looks quite good. We can run the whole thing and check it out. Has the hover effect and everything. That's very nice. As you can see, there's still this wide boundary around the button, so that's something we'll want to change. We can do that by opening our menu theme again, and then that's gonna be the focus texture probably. Let's try it out. Yep, Seems like it's gone. Okay, as a last thing, let's rename all those buttons so that we'll have an easier time later on to find them. Next, we want the buttons to do something. For that, we first add a script to the main pause screen container. Let's first create a signal called button pressed, which gets emitted whenever we press one of these buttons for other functions to handle. Then we click on those buttons on the pressed signal and connect it to the script. So this function now gets called whenever we press the corresponding button. To make the buttons emit the signal when they are pressed, we add this line of code. Alright, next we want to add something that listens to the signal. So we add a child node called an audio stream player. So this will play the sound whenever we press one of the buttons. We again attach script to this and we load the sound. This is done with the preload function. Now we take this button press signal which we just created and attach it to the script of the audio player. And then when this button gets emitted, we play it. So now you can see all these buttons have got a sound. Let's add some rudimentary function to the exit button. Basically, once it's pressed, we will wait for a short time. So let's say 0.1 seconds. And then afterwards, we will terminate the whole program with this command. So now we can press the buttons and we have the button sounds, and then at the end we can press exit to desktop and the game quits. Alright, in this last segment we want to add some functionality to the game around the menu. So we create a new script, now associated to the root. And the first thing we're going to do is to set the mouse mode, which basically means that the mouse is shown while in the menu but captured, so invisible, when we are in the game. Okay, so now we're creating a function which is basically saying as soon as we press the cancel button, which is by default escape, then we pause the game and we want the pause screen to be shown. And as I said earlier, that also means we want the mouse to be shown. Confined means that it's inside the window. Now we change this to when paused, which basically means that all the logic in here will only ever be looked at when we are in the pause mode. Now in this script we need a function back to game, which basically reverses this process. So it gets us back to the game, sets the mouse back to hidden, and also removes the menu. After we press the button, we'll wait for a short second and then unpause the game. Now all we have to do is to make this function be called once the back to game button is pressed. Okay, now we can demonstrate this. So I can press escape to show the menu and press back to game to go back. I can also quit it with exit to desktop. Okay, the final touch we are going to add is basically we want the menu to also be closable when we press escape. So we don't just want to have to press the back to game button. And we do that by basically in the menu checking whether the cancel button is pressed again. And if it is pressed, we are also gonna execute this back to game function. And that's it. So now you can see we can also press escape to close the menu again. Time for the final showcase. We can open and close the menu with escape. The buttons change the texture if we hover over them. They've got sound effects. We can go back to game with the button. And we can also exit to desktop. And done.